Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I call the meeting to order. Will the clerk take the roll?
It'll actually be me today.
Oh, go ahead.
Everybody's busy, huh?
Yeah, they are busy with the election.
Yeah, that's what okay.
One second, let me pull up my roll call sheet.
I agree.
Mr. Polachek,
Here?
Mr. Picard,
Here.
Jason, I apologize, I'm blanking on your last name. Jason Shear, thank you.
It's a tough one to pronounce.
Mr. Waters,
Here.
Mr. White, and ma'am, I apologize, Miss Wagner, there we go, thank you.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to item number 3. If there are no corrections, the minutes were sent out ahead of time. If there are no corrections, I would entertain a motion to approve. We can do that by voice vote. For the minutes for the last meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Mark, seconded by Jason to approve the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hearing nays? Hearing no nays, the minutes are approved. The next item is Public Works, public comment section, and I think we have a visitor tonight. Could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, thank you. My name is Melissa Priestley. I live in Lake Mills off of Marguerite and Madison Street with my family. Our neighborhood is thriving with elementary-aged children who walk to and from school during the school year and during the summer school programs. As you know, sidewalks and crosswalks are very important to ensure safety of our children when they're walking to school, as well as ensure safety of the pedestrians. As you can see in the map that's in front of you, we have one crosswalk on Madison Street that is by the middle school. That is the only crosswalk that is safely allowing our children in our neighborhood to cross the street. The second crosswalk is by the elementary school, which is off of Prospect Avenue. That one has a crossing guard. You can see with the dotted green lines, that indicates the paths that our elementary school children are walking from our neighborhood to the school. So we are here to request a crosswalk to safely get our children across Madison Street to Prospect Street and Fremont Street, so that we can ensure that motor vehicles are slowing down and adhering to the fact that we have children that are walking. And it's right now unmarked, so we just don't feel safe with the way it's set up today. So that's what we're asking for, and you can see on the map where we've highlighted what's available today, what those paths are, and where our children are located. So any questions?
Yes, can I clarify where you're asking for the crosswalk to be installed? And it looks
Yes.
like there's 3 locations?
So right now, the crosswalk that's currently there that's lighted is by the middle school. What we're asking for is down by Madison, where you have Prospect Street. There is no crosswalk to get from Madison Street to Prospect.
Got it.
And right now, there's a sidewalk, but we're using a driveway. And one of the fellow members up here, we use his driveway to cross just about daily to get safely to Prospect. Once our children are in Prospect, it's a straight walk down to Main Street, which is where we have the crossing guard.
Yep.
So that's where we're
Word
looking
Lake
for a
Mills is-
crosswalk. If possible, we would like another one by Fremont Street. So Fremont and Madison, as you can see there by the Rock Lake Activity Center, there's quite a bit of traffic to Rock Lake Activity Center, both in the summer and school year. So we're looking for a crosswalk there as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
As far as crosswalk, you're just looking for a painted Crosswalk on the road, correct?
Painted crosswalk on the road would be great.
Thank you.
We would even have, I know Madison, they have buckets with flags that children can carry when they walk across the crosswalk. We're open to those options once we have the painted lines.
Okay. Drake, do you have some comments here?
I don't have any comments tonight. We should probably place this on a future agenda for discussion. We're discouraged from discussing items not listed on the agenda, so we can certainly put together some information for a discussion on at a future meeting, and potentially put some costs together on what curb cuts and the ADA ramps that would be required to install to have crosswalks available. So we will, if the board would like to, we'll put together some information for a future agenda.
I think that would be great, especially September is right around the corner, and they're going to start school pretty quickly here. Okay?
There, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for coming. Moving on to item number 5, recommendations and discussion for the 2025 capital improvement plan. This was posted earlier. If anybody checked the agenda ahead of time, there's a motion to accept this in your packet, and as well as project descriptions, and then a summary of projects by each department. So with that, I think we'll turn it over to Drake and Dwayne to walk us through item number 5.
Sure. So this is an annual agenda item for the Public Works Board. What you'll see here are the capital projects on our 5-year CIP plan for the departments/divisions that are under the purview of this board. So you've got the electric utility, water utility, wastewater utility, and the streets department. Streets department incorporates roadways, sidewalks, curb and gutter, and stormwater improvements. So that is what is in front of you tonight. As part of our ongoing goal of improving the accessibility and detail of this plan for public consumption, we have included project descriptions for you for this year so that you can look into a little bit more detail on what the project entails. We're hoping to improve this process each and every year. So it is still a work in progress from where we started last year on it. But if there are any specific questions on projects that you have, we'll do our best to answer them. Formally, only the 2025 projects are technically approved by the city council at the end of this process. The rest are for planning purposes. If you have questions on any year or any project, we will do our best to answer them as well. I would only note on the summary sheet, you've got a funding and grants page. We've added that to show an alternative source of revenue. So we will have to, the way the grants are structured, we'll front those costs and then we apply for reimbursement as we expend the dollars. So they are short-term borrows to kind of bridge that gap. But as you can see, the library's on there, which you don't have to worry about tonight. But as you can see, we've got $400,000 for Harvey Road, almost $700,000 a piece for South CP Avenue and Westlake Park Place. Harvey Road was an LRIP grant that was awarded. That's in partnership with the town of Aztalan. And then CP Avenue and Westlake Park Place were STP urban grants that we received this year. So those years are when the funding becomes available for those projects. So that is what that category of funding and grants means. So it looks as if it's a cost, but that's actually a source of revenue we will be receiving. So if you add those numbers to the numbers that you see within like the streets department for them, that's the total roadwork cost for construction. But we're only actually paying for what's listed under the streets department. The rest is being funded by the grant.
I noticed there were 3 projects that, and I wondered if you could speak to the ratings. You know, we have the condition ratings, Harvey and Milton, and then there was the 3rd project. Those are the 3 main projects, and I'm just wondering if you could just share some information about those ratings. It looked like they were all like number 2 on a scale of 1 to 10.
Dwayne?
Sure. A minute or two to pull that file up, if you would. It is in the project detail information.
Yep.
And I believe some of that information is on actually the photo
Yes.
that's attached to each one.
Right.
And so Westlake Park Place is a 2. I'm just seeing that one off, first one that came on my screen. Drake has said Prospect is a 2. I believe Harvey was a 3 from the grant application from my memory.
Yep.
Can you explain pacer ratings?
And just to review pacer ratings, pacer ratings is how we rate the surface of our streets. We rate them from 1 to 10, 10 being a brand-new street. A 9 typically is either a year-old street or a recently mill and overlaid. And then tracks all the way down into, 3s and 4s where we're starting to talk about mill and overlays and full-depth mills. We start getting into that 1 to 3 category, and the street is too far gone, and we're looking at reconstruction.
So the 3 major projects they're totally ready to be redone.
Yes, in fact, although you're not seeing them all, I have projects that are probably in that 1 to 3 category out to 2035, unfortunately.
Okay.
So you'll see, you'll remember from the maintenance plan discussion what we do to try and extend the life of the roadway. And so once it gets to that 1 to 3, those life extending procedures aren't
Effective.
they're not effective. So the base has basically deteriorated to the point that no matter what you do to the surface anymore, all of those problems are just going to pop right back up again, sometimes as soon as the following season. So when it gets to that point, a reconstruction is the only viable way to improve the quality of the road.
Got it. So how would you like to approach this with the discussion? I'd like to open up the conversation to members here.
I'll start by asking a question or two. In 2026, underwater is LSL, and there's a fairly good-sized number there. Is that related to East Prospect Street or something else?
Great question. Again, as Drake has mentioned, we're working to make this product better every year. We put it in 26 to show that there's a dollar amount associated with lead service line replacements that are remaining. There's about 90 left on the city's poor side portion. Typically, when a private property owner does their service, where the utility is required to replace theirs as well. And there's a cost, about $5,000 per service. There's approximately 90 left on the city side. One option, although not fully explained in the plan, is some of the new funding. There are some possible fundings for private available in the near future, and we are exploring those. That's why we pushed this into 26. But if we would explore that and we would push to finish all of the lead service lines throughout the city, and the utility is forced then to pay the city side, we would be looking at a $450,000.
So if the funding became available for those private residents to repair their lead service line, that would necessitate the utility also replacing its portion of it. So that's in there right now for, in the event that that funding becomes available and the city chooses to go down that path, the funding exists for us to complete our portion of it. So we may not need that full 450,000. We may not need it all in 1 year. So it's a policy discussion at some point that will come up on what we choose to do and what opportunities we take advantage of that may become available to us. But we wanted to show that it's a possibility in 2026 if that event occurs.
And know that as services are replaced now, they're absorbed by the utility maintenance budget. But when there's only 5 or 6, that's not as much of an issue when you're versus 90.
So if this private funding for homeowners comes through and homeowners replace theirs, the city is not required to replace the city portion at that time?
We would be.
Okay.
It would be
So-
required. I think if I'm remembering the program correctly, that if the funding becomes available and the city chooses to take advantage of it, we'll be required to
Okay.
adopt an ordinance, I believe, saying that these are prohibited and you must replace them.
Okay.
And that's been a conversation I know the DNR has had as a requirement to access this potential funding.
Right. Policy decision.
Anything with the lift stations in terms of, sometimes those pumps go out. Do you have any, can you speak about emergency funds for that?
There's one
We had a
item.
situation about a year ago over on South Ferry.
So there's one item in 2025, I believe it's listed under the wastewater utility, a generator, and that is a mobile, is it in there? A mobile generator in order to deploy it to an area that may have been, that may have lost power.
Okay.
Am I missing that, Dwayne?
There was one in '24 in the current budget.
Okay, so we'll have bought it this year,
Okay.
purchased it.
Okay.
So we have, I believe we have one already, and this was the second one that we've purchased, so, that is our main way of ensuring they get back online before power is fully restored to those areas. They can also be used on the wells. It's a little different since we are capable of running the city's water system for a limited period of time, even off of one of our wells. So we do have redundancies built into the system, but with wastewater, obviously, that's a different system, so we would need to deploy our mobile generators in order to bring them back online until we could restore power.
Okay. Other comments, discussions, items?
Yeah.
Great.
As I look at this list, there's a grand total listed of 8.4 million for 2025. And I know that the library is taking up 4.6 of that. How much of this 8.4 is grants, I guess, is my question. And because, of course, we wouldn't do that library project unless a significant part of it was covered by grants.
Yeah, so in this list here, that 4.6 would be backed out of that total, and the remainder would be our locally funded through typically borrowing each year. So that 8.4 minus that 4.6 would be the actual total that would be fully funded by the city.
So we're looking at about 3.8 then?
3.8.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
And I guess just for general purposes, not sure if everyone has heard this spiel from me before, but the funding mechanisms for utility projects and what's called general fund projects, or that's essentially government-funded projects, are separate. So the electric utility, wastewater utility, water utility will cover it through revenue debt that's issued by the utility. So that's backed by the utility's ability to pay its obligations through the rates that it collects. those interest rates are typically a little bit higher than the ones that are on the government side, as those are called general obligation debt. That is backed by the full faith and credit of the city, so essentially our taxing authority. So that's considered as pretty much as secure of debt that you could issue. So those interest rates are usually the most competitive. The general obligation notes are regulated by the Wisconsin State Constitution. So the amount of debt you're allowed to take out is a certain percentage of the value of the city. The revenue debt is essentially regulated. Typically, a rule of thumb is you need $1.25 of revenue for every dollar of debt that you have, I believe, is typically the standard. So you have to show, when you're going out, you have to show that you have sufficient revenue to cover the debt that you're taking out and cover the debt service. So they're just two a little bit separate revenue sources. And so that's just for general knowledge.
So as I look at this 3.8, the street department is part of municipality and everything else would pretty much fall under utilities then? Is that fair?
Or special assessment.
Okay, special assessment's part of municipality?
It is, but that's funded by the special assessments that we collect from the adjacent property owners to that area.
Great.
It would be fronted by the general fund, though, so that's correct.
So like the funding, that 71,000 could be subtracted. So we're down at 3.7.
So it looks like 2026 has got, quite a bit coming online in 2026 versus 2025.
2026 is, that's when Prospect Street is
yep.
scheduled, and that is a very high dollar amount of road reconstruction that's driving a lot of that difference.
Yep. And that's been talked about for a long time. So, so it's now chickens coming
Doesn't
home
have
to
to
roost
be.
type.
It's recommended to be in 2026, but
Right.
obviously in conversations with the city council, typically if you're looking to defer a project, road reconstruction is typically where you look, because once a road has reached the reconstruction piece of it, there's nothing else you can do to it. So like we delayed Milton Street a year previously, so none of it is set in stone until anything's approved by the city council. So anything in those out years, they can move and shift. If you were to look at past approved CIPs, you would have seen some road projects have shifted because we got grant funding for other ones. So grant funding will bump them up the priority list because there's an alternative source of revenue for them. But Prospect Street is certainly recommended to be completed sooner rather than later.
Right.
And to add to that, we typically add one street section in each year.
Yeah.
Typically, and then through the process, if it would get bumped. And as Drake just mentioned, so if Milton or Prospect gets bumped in either 25 or 26, realize that that bump then pushes one of those out to probably 2030 because of the three funded projects, unless the city would like to undertake two projects in 1 year in those later funded years.
Well, from a need standpoint, I know that the need is there for those projects to be completed. So, did you have more to add to that, Greg?
I'm good, thank you.
I have a follow-up on the special assessment. So in 2025, there's Linden Street and sidewalk maintenance for special assessment. I know we only special assess for new construction, so can you explain that, especially both of them?
Both of them. So Linden Street is based on a property owner or a property that has recently been annexed, and requires sewer and water utility extensions. That 56,000 is 1/3 of the total cost. The other costs are properties that are still in the township that are then currently shown in the sewer and water project. So like funding in this case, 1/3 of it is coming from a newly annexed property. The sidewalk maintenance is really something that I tried to show like we did for the street maintenance. We showed an annual $300,000 in the street maintenance so that you could see how that is always happening. This is a new line we hadn't put in before, but typically sidewalk maintenance or sidewalk repairs that you've seen on maybe East Lake Street in the last month, typically on an annual basis, 15,000 of it comes from this fund.
Oh, okay.
We're not necessarily special assessing new for those sidewalks because it is incorporated, but it's coming from this fund. And so that's why we're showing the 15,000. The additional 15,000 for sidewalk repairs then also shows up in
Street Department.
the street department, I believe. Thank you.
Yep.
Right. It's for when new sidewalk construction was done in the past, it's assessed and it goes into that fund, and this is pulling out of that fund 15,000 each year.
Correct.
Yep.
Until a certain point, of course, if the fund is not viable, that we'd have to change that.
Yeah.
Okay. Additional thoughts, comments?
I have one hopefully last question. So, replacement equipment. I saw something about how it's done typically on a schedule. Is that kind of a guide, or is that kind of set in stone? Do you look at the condition of equipment, or do you just kind of do it like clockwork?
A little of both. And like the plan, like this plan, we're doing the same, building fleet management and working to strive to make that better. Typically, we're looking at a 15-year life on some of the vehicles. Of course, if a vehicle is in great shape after 15 years, we're probably going to keep it in the fleet unless it makes sense to replace. Similarly, if there's a vehicle that maybe has been damaged, but for no fault of, or just has not been a productive piece of equipment and is always in the mechanic shop,
Yeah.
then those are probably going to slide into a little less useful life. And we hope, as Drake had said, we hope in the future to provide more details on all of that fleet. We did focus this year on entering at least all of the vehicles. We're going to continue to work on adding all of the tools, larger tools into this database as well. And so they're actually out into future years, which you're not seeing because it's beyond the 5-year plan. But what you'll notice in the details is it's actually showing the VIN number, it's actually showing the year. So there's some of that information so that you can gather how long or how old some of the vehicles truly are.
Yeah, so a point of emphasis this year was creating a comprehensive, essentially, I guess, fleet asset list and establishing what we have, how old it is, beginning to, establish clear procedures for tracking maintenance costs, things that we're putting into it, and really getting some solid data to factor into when replacement is necessary. The only piece of the police department squads are on a strict replacement schedule. And that is based off of, even if they haven't had a lot of trouble, when we get to that, they're run very hard.
Safety.
And they need to be operating at peak performance, and so we replace on that schedule. Even if we haven't been experiencing, maintenance issues, usually we are seeing that wear and tear because it's hard on the brakes. Those vehicles idle pretty frequently, which is difficult on them. And so is it an 8-year? They're on an 8-year life right now. So we're almost always each year buying a squad. and rotating one out of the fleet. We will keep them in our fleet sometimes if they are still functioning as administrative vehicles. The building inspector has taken one before. We've transferred them to the utility before for meter readers and things like that, so we will continue to look for a use for them if they're still functioning properly, just not as a police pursuit vehicle.
And note that the police and fire, actually, some of the requirements of the fire department also, on some of their vehicles, there's some replacement timelines. Of course, both of those departments are not in the Public Works presentation tonight.
One more
Greg.
statement. I know that we're primarily looking at 2025 because we're
Yep.
trying to get this to city council for budgeting
Yep.
purposes, but as I look at 26 and 27, those are some large
Yep.
numbers. 7.8 in 2026. I realize a little bit over $1 million of that is a lift station at Sandy Beach, which of course Sandy Beach is a project that we're trying to move forward with. And then in 27, you had a little bit over $1 million for assessments at Brookstone, but still those numbers are pretty heavy. So hopefully we can take a close look at our needs and hopefully bring those down in that $4 to $3 million mark instead of hanging out around 7 million. So
At 26 looks like it's front-loaded. Maybe there's some items that can be pushed and these bottom lines can get spread out so they can be closer together in terms of differences.
Yeah, I have focused on incorporating foreman feedback, so frontline employee feedback into the development of this. And what we are currently working on is a prioritization of everything that's listed in this plan. So in the event that the Public Works Board or the City Council says, this top line dollar amount is just too much, come back with some recommendations for things that could be moved into later years, we'll be able to go to those lists and find what may be lower on the priority list that would be the least impactful to delay to future years. So it is certainly on our mind. These are big numbers. Greg, you'll see larger numbers when the full thing comes to the City Council as well. So there certainly will be an opportunity for conversation and other decisions to be made to lower that burden and spread out those costs if that's the desire.
okay, thank you.
That's really where your condition reports can help, right? So, okay. If there's are there any other questions, any input, discussion? Okay, are we ready to, is there a motion to approve the 2025 capital improvement plan?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Greg and seconded by Mark to approve the 2025 capital improvement plans. And please I think we should have a roll vote.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mr. Polachek?
Aye.
Mr. Picard?
Aye.
Mr. Shear?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Aye. Okay, the motion passes. And I think we move on to item number 6, which is recommendation for future agendas. And tonight we did have a public presentation during the public comment section to look into crosswalks for the middle school there. And in consideration of the plan that Melissa sent out, provided, I think we should take a look at what she's presented tonight. Are there other thoughts for future agendas? Okay, hearing none, meeting has been adjourned. Right? All right. Thank you, everyone.